Good evening, Advocate Snyman, I see.
Good evening, Chief Justice.
How are you, ma'am?
I'm doing well, thank you, Chief Justice.
You seem to be a little bit nervous. Let me try and settle you down a bit. You were a police person or a policewoman for some 11 years, more than 11 years, I think. Am I right?
Indeed, indeed, right.
And
shortly after school, after matriculated, I was keen to be financially independent, and I therefore applied and was successful in becoming a functional police officer. I wanted to study. I studied the police diploma, and in the police diploma, part of the functions or part of the subjects were civil procedure as well as criminal procedure, which absolutely grabbed me. And that led to my studies for the BUris and LLB, which I obtained.
yes, I noticed that you made quite some progress. You moved from constable, sergeant, warrant officer, all the way up to captain.
I did indeed, CJ. I was employed as a student constable. I think it would be at 18 years old. And having studied the police diploma, I then obtained the rank of sergeant, warrant officer, and captain up until my studies were finalized at UNISA, being the URIS and LLB. While I was full-time working, I studied and funded my studies with my salary.
Yes.
Yes.
And you've been an advocate for over 19 years, am I right? Practicing as an advocate.
Indeed, Chief Justice. In 2001, I resigned from the police service and I applied for pupillage in 2002, where I did my pupillage at the Pretoria Bar, and I was bestowed senior counsel in 2019, during which period I also made myself available to start and act.
Yes. You've acted both in Gauteng and the Northwest, but more in Gauteng, am I right?
More in Northwest.
Or is it more in Northwest?
It's much more in Northwest. In
August, September.
In Gauteng,
sorry, okay. October to April, okay, I see. What a longer continuous period from October to April.
Indeed, indeed.
All right.
I had the opportunity to act for 13 weeks in the Gauteng division, for which I am very thankful and grateful to the JP to having granted me that opportunity. Being able to act in Gauteng made me realize that I am ready, after 19 years of being a practicing advocate, that I am ready to progress to the next level in my career. And after, it was not continuous, but after periods of having acted in Gauteng, I was called to act in Northwest. Coincidentally, I'm also born and raised in Rustenburg. And going in the Mahikeng High Court, I started acting on the 5th of October. I continued acting the whole term. I was on recess duty together with another judge. And the next term, which is the first term of this year, I was also acting, as well as this recess duty.
And what is the longest you've kept the judgment reserved for?
CJ, all of my judgments, I endeavor to have them delivered or handed down within a period of a month or two. There is one judgment, however, which is the Klasedi matter, which took longer, and that was a period of just over 3 months that it took me to deliver that judgment. It was a matter that developed the common law, and it was a very, very complicated matter in relation to facts as well as the legal principles. That judgment is substantive, and it was handed down a week or two after the 3 months period.
Thank you. Colleagues, as usual, before I call on the JP and the Premier, may I have a list of those who want to put questions to the Senior Counsel, please?
Honored.
Dodovu.
JP, over to you.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Good afternoon, Advocate Snyman.
Good afternoon, JP.
Yes, you acted in Gauteng, and when you came to the Northwest, can you just explain the kind of work that you were exposed to and the workload that you encountered in the Northwest?
Thank you, JP. While I was in Gauteng, I had exposure to a very broad spectrum in the law. I did not have exposure in urgent applications as well as in criminal matters. When I started acting in Mahikeng, I apologize. After I started acting in Mahikeng, it was a much more broad exposure. I have done several criminal matters, which include circuit court matters. I've also done full court appeals, also of which I had written the judgment in. The exposure in Northwest was from the beginning up until today, where I am here. The exposure provided me with the opportunity to be able to prove myself. And here today, I sit before you, a well-rounded candidate, having had experience in my practice for 20 years, as well as the periods in acting from Gauteng as well as in Mahikeng, brings me to more than 10 months that I have acted. Thank you, JP.
And I see in your application, you mentioned that you suffered from depression. And the workload in the Northwest, will you be, or are you able to cope with it, taking into account that we are fewer, but the workload is too much?
Indeed, JP, the workload is, there's a frightening realization for any person who think that the Northwest does not have the workload that it indeed has. When I started there, JP, to come back to the question, to answer the question first, yes, I do suffer from depression. I disclosed it in an addendum that I sent, and having the workload of a permanent judge for 2 consecutive terms, which includes 2 consecutive recesses. The workload is something that, coming from a successful practice, I am comfortable managing and have managed. And the fact that I have only had 1 judgment passing over 3 months is indicative of that. The depression itself has been diagnosed very early in my career. And to address that specifically, I am using medication. I also believe there's a stigma to an illness such as depression. And in as far as any doubt in any mind, and specifically in my mind, it has been erased by the fact that I am able to cope, I deliver my judgments, and I can deal with the full workload of a permanent judge.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Honorable JP. Honorable Premier.
Thank you, CJ. Advocate Snyman, having grown up in Northwest, but also having done some work in Gauteng, in your practice, have you been able to pick up any socio-cultural characteristics on a comparative basis between Northwest and Gauteng, to the extent they are relevant to the work of a legal practitioner such as yourself?
Thank you. I would say yes, there are definitely differences. Gauteng, I have had the honor to act in both Johannesburg as well as in Pretoria. And it is informally referred to as a sibling rivalry between Johannesburg and Pretoria. Whereas going to Northwest, it is a much more rural area, and the type of matters that you deal with as a judge varies much more, and than the matters that I was exposed to at Gauteng. In Northwest, it was a complete reign of the different aspects in law where that the judges are being asked to adjudicate on, as well as the matter, the fact that the role itself is different in Gauteng than in Northwest, which I believe is due to the fact that the two divisions are inherently different in the citizens living in that geographical area, as well as the nature of the disputes that would arise in a city area as opposed to a more rural area. Thank you, Premier.
And if you had your choice, which of the environments do you think appeal more to you in doing your judicial duties?
Premier, I was very blessed and honored to be called in Gauteng. And when I was called to Mahikeng, it felt like going home. I am enjoying it immensely. I have also discussed it with my family, and should I be appointed, there's no doubt we will relocate to Mahikeng. It is not only the work, but also the colleagues at the bench that make the difference between the two divisions, in my opinion.
Thank you, CJ. Thank you, Advocate Snyman.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Premier. Commissioner Barnard.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Good afternoon, Advocate Snyman, JSC.
Commissioner.
Thank you. I'd like to just ask you about on the health issues. You initially indicated no issues. That was around about November, and then you revised that early in February. is there a reason why I see one of the issues was a recent occurrence, and then two had been long-standing? Is there a reason why you initially didn't disclose any of those in the application?
Commissioner, that was a bona fide, yeah, I apologize. That was a bona fide error from my side. When the applications were submitted, it was on the 26th of November. When the shortlisted candidates were published, and in preparation of coming to the interview, I went through the questionnaire and realized that it might be something that I need to disclose. I prefer to err on the safe side and disclose it well in advance, which was in February.
Thank you. And then if I can move on to something else, it's in the judgment, you know, the reasons for ruling that you gave in the Rule 30A judgment. Just it might be somewhat technical, but I think it's important to just clarify. And you obviously had to exercise some patience in dealing with this matter. One can see that from the record and the proceedings. But if one looks at paragraph 15 and paragraph 16 on page 8, and I'm not going to quote the section, but I'll just briefly explain to you what it says. You basically say that the old law societies that are mentioned there, the Transvaal, Northern Provinces, and the Bophuthatswana, they were replaced by the Law Society of South Africa. And then in the next paragraph, the Law Society of South Africa was replaced by the Legal Practice Council. Just to point out, I think it's important for clarity that, and I put it to you that the Law Society of South Africa was never a regulator. You had the provincial regulators, which under the Legal Practice Council became the national regulator. The Law Society of South Africa was merely a coordinating body and is now a representative body. Any comment on that? It seems to be differently indicated in the judgment itself.
Indeed. Commissioner, with this matter, the issue that I addressed in paragraph 15 and 16 dealt with service on the law bodies. The applicant in this matter raised the Rule 30 irregular proceeding that there was no service effected of the opposing notice to a rescission application, where the service in terms of the applicant should have been done on the Bophuthatswana Law Society and on the Limpopo, the previous Law Society, Attorneys Profession, Law Society of Northern Transvaal. Commissioner, thank you very much for bringing that to my attention. I was not aware thereof. I do, however, believe that the reasons for judgment dealt with the issue that was the crux of the complaint in the Rule 30, which would have been the service which could not have been made on the Bophuthatswana Law Society or the Northern Province Law Society, merely because those entities do not exist any longer.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Commissioner. Honorable Dodovu.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice. Good afternoon, Acting Judge.
Good afternoon.
Are you okay this afternoon?
I am. Thank you very
good.
much.
I'm happy that you accept that there are differences in terms of the kind of cases in Gauteng and the Northwest. Would you agree with me that in the Northwest, some of the cases pertains to the Traditional Leadership and Governance Framework Act? Thank you that you agree to that. This act also spells how these traditional councils must be established. Do you know what does it say, how they must be established? Because they are a source of conflict within the communities.
Indeed, Commissioner.
Yes, can you share with the commission what does the law say in terms of the composition of the traditional councils?
Thank you. Commissioner, having come from Gauteng, there was no pertinent issue that I had to deal with that related to tribal issues. In Mahikeng, however, in the Northwest Division, I have dealt with two matters where the indigenous law as well as the fair treatment of the status in the tribal council would be affected. The two applications, one was for a burial where the tribal differences was
Yes, but that's not my question. My question is, do you know what does the law say in terms of the composition of the traditional councils?
Commissioner,
Do you know or you don't know?
I don't know.
Yes, you don't know. My second question, in respect of the dispute resolution mechanism that are in place, do you know how you must go about resolving those disputes? What does the law say?
It must be first determined by the tribal councils themselves before it comes to the court.
Okay, let me leave it. You're saying you're from Rustenburg, that's where you were born.
That's correct, Commissioner.
There is a traditional council next to Rustenburg.
Yes.
Do you know the name of that traditional council?
Bafokeng.
Who is the Khosi of Bafokeng?
Commissioner, I apologize. I do not know who the Khosi
They attempt to be the richest traditional tribe in the whole of Africa.
I apologize. I do not know their name, and I can offer in Tswana, Kikupela Tswarelo.
Oh yes.
I do not know the name. I might
Okay.
have come across their names in process in court proceedings, but at this stage, I apologize. I do not know.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Chief Justice.
Follow up, CJ.
Thank you. Yes, Honorable Malema.
What's your take on customary law?
Real Twarela.
Have you done anything customary law? Can you take us briefly on customary law?
Yes, I have done customary law. In my practice, I dealt with customary law quite often. That mostly related to burial disputes, where it would be a dispute between the husband's family and the wife's family of who's going to be the one to execute the burial rites. The other issues on customary law was, as I mentioned, the chieftainship, where there were two tribes within an overcovering body of tribes that had an agreement between the tribes and their forefathers that the tribes would rotate the leadership of the specific tribe. My take on customary law is that it is part of our law. It's part of our developing law, and it's part of, of our common law. If that answers your question. Mr.
No,
Chairman.
you're confusing me. You're saying there are two tribes over the tribe. What do you mean by that?
There was a tribal faction. There were two tribes, and then there was an overwhelming control tribe.
There were two factions within a tribe
Correct,
contesting who is the rightful chief.
correct.
Do you know any African language?
Commissioner, I am learning. I cannot hold a conversation in an African language. I did, however, employ a part-time lecturer in languages in order, while I was still practicing in Pretoria, to come to my chambers once a week and teach me Sepedi. Now that I am practicing in Northwest and Mahikeng, and also resorting from Rustenburg itself, Setswana is much easier on my ear, and I am now learning at a much faster rate, since especially in the circuit courts, where the interpreter and language specialist explains and interprets. I have a habit of carrying a little dictionary with me because I do yearn to speak either Setswana or Sepedi.
Thank you, CJ.
Thank you, Honorable Malema. Advocate Snyman, you're excused.
Thank you, CJ. Thank you, commissioners.